The night was cold, colder than any winter the human had ever felt. The alien world was wrapped in endless white snow, and the wind howled like a beast. Each gust cut into his skin. Each step felt heavier than the last. He pulled his coat tighter. But the storm was not kind. The storm wanted to bury him, wanted to erase every sign of life under its white blanket. He should have stayed inside his camp. He should have waited for the storm to pass. But something pushed him forward, a feeling deep in his chest, a strange instinct that told him to keep moving, and then he heard it. At first it was soft, almost hidden under the scream of the wind, a faint cry, weak and desperate. The human stopped, his heart racing. He turned his head, listening again, and there it was, the sound of voices, fragile, breaking, calling for help. Most people would have ignored it, thinking it was only the wind playing tricks, but the human could not. He pushed his boots into the snow, forcing himself toward the sound. The storm fought him. The cold bit at his face. But he did not stop. Every step felt like a battle. Yet, he kept moving. The cries grew clearer, sharper, more desperate, until finally he saw it. Two small shapes half buried under the snow. The sight froze him in place. They were not human. Their skin was pale silver, glowing faintly even in the storm. Their eyes were closed, their faces peaceful but weak. They looked like they were already slipping away, already sinking into death's arms. Two alien sisters huddled together, trying to share the last bit of warmth. The human dropped to his knees beside them, brushing snow away with trembling hands. Their bodies were ice cold, their breathing shallow. He could feel their life, fading. "Stay awake," he whispered, though he knew they could not hear him, without thinking. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around their fragile forms. The snow whipped harder, but he shielded them with his body. He could not let them die here. Not like this. Not when he had found them. Not when hope still lived in their chests. The human's mind raced. If he stayed out here too long, he too would freeze, but if he left them, they would not survive. He had only one choice: carry them. He lifted the first sister, her body light as feathers, her head resting against his chest. Then the second, her hand still clutching her sister's as if refusing to let go. With both in his arms he stood, legs shaking but heart burning. The storm roared against him, testing his strength, testing his will. He walked, step by heavy step, searching for any sign of shelter. Snow blinded him, darkness swallowed the land. But he refused to stop, refused to let the sisters fall back into the snow. Every time his knees buckled, he forced himself upright again. Every time his body screamed to rest, he pushed forward. The sisters needed him, and that was enough. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like eternity. The cold wanted to break him, wanted to take him too. But the human was stubborn, and his heart was louder than the storm. Finally, through the blur of white, he saw it. A shadow in the distance, a rocky shape, a cave mouth hidden under layers of snow. It was small, but it was shelter. With the last of his strength, he stumbled toward it, carrying the sisters inside. The cave was dark, silent except for the howling storm outside. He laid the sisters gently on the ground, pulling them close to the wall where the wind could not touch them. He rubbed their hands, their arms, trying to bring back warmth. His own fingers burned with cold, his breath sharp in his chest, but he refused to give up. He whispered again, "You are not dying tonight, not while I'm here." One of the sisters stirred faintly, her lips trembling, her voice barely a whisper. Warm, please." The human's heart broke at the sound. He pulled them closer, wrapping them both in his arms. His body heat became their shield, his heartbeat their anchor. Slowly, their shivering eased, their breaths grew steadier, but their eyes remained closed, their strength not yet returned. He sat awake in the darkness, refusing to sleep. Outside, the storm screamed, but inside, he was a wall against death. He had saved them, for now. But deep in his mind, he knew this was only the beginning. Who were they? Why were they out here alone? And who or what was hunting them? The human did not yet know, but fate had chosen this night, this storm, and this moment. A single human, 2 alien sisters, and a bond born under the snow. And beyond the storm's roar, danger was waiting, watching, and ready to strike. The cave was silent except for the sound of shallow breaths. The human sat with the 2 alien sisters in his arms, their bodies still trembling from the cold. The fire he had managed to start with broken sticks and a spark from his survival kit gave only a weak glow, but in this frozen world, even a small flame felt like a miracle. He studied their faces under the dim light. Their silver skin glistened faintly, as if painted by starlight. Their hair was long, tangled with ice, and their lips were pale. They looked fragile, yet there was something strange about them, something noble, something different. He wondered who they were, and why they were alone in such a deadly storm. One of the sisters stirred, her eyes flickering open. They were bright. Glowing like 2 shards of blue crystal, she looked at him, her gaze filled with fear. She whispered in a weak voice, "Human, why save us?" The words were broken but clear enough to pierce his heart. He shook his head. "Because no one deserves to die out there." The sister blinked, as if confused, before her strength failed and her eyes closed again. The human knew they needed warmth fast. Their fragile bodies had lost too much heat. Without hesitation, he took off his inner shirt and wrapped it around them, pulling them close. His body heat spread slowly but not fast enough. Time was running out. He remembered the training back on Earth, how to keep hypothermia victims alive. Skin to skin, warmth, steady breathing, never letting them sleep too deep. It was risky, but there was no other choice. He pressed the sisters closer, wrapping them like a shield. He whispered again, "Stay with me. You'll make it." The storm outside screamed against the cave walls. Every gust of wind sounded like claws scratching the stone, and then he froze. Because in the middle of the storm, a new sound rose. It was low, guttural, almost like a growl. Something was out there, something alive. The sisters shivered as if they too could sense it even in their weak state. The human reached for his pack and pulled out the only weapon he had, a compact plasma pistol. It wasn't strong, but it was enough to keep enemies away for a while. He aimed it toward the mouth of the cave, every muscle tense. For long minutes there was only wind, only snow. But then, shadows moved outside, tall and slow, circling, waiting, not beasts, not storm-born creatures, but hunters, the humans. Heart pounded. If they found the cave, if they discovered the sisters, they would all be dead. He crouched lower, placing himself between the sisters and the entrance. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the air. The sisters breathed faintly, unaware of the danger crawling closer. And then, a sharp howl cut through the night. The hunters were calling to each other, closing in. The human's breath slowed, his finger resting on the trigger. He knew he couldn't fight many of them, not with one pistol, not in this storm. But he also knew he couldn't let the sisters be taken. He remembered the desperate way they had clung to each other under the snow, the way their weak voices had begged for warmth. He had made a choice when he carried them into the cave. Now he had to stand by it, no matter what came. The shadows moved again, but this time they didn't enter. Instead, they lingered, circling like wolves, testing the cave. The human waited, every nerve burning, until slowly the growls faded. The hunters had moved on. For now. But deep inside, he knew they would be back. The sisters were not just random victims of the storm. Someone, or something, wanted them dead. Hours passed, and the storm finally began to soften. The human kept the fire alive, feeding it with every scrap of wood he had. At last, one of the sisters opened her eyes again. This time, both glowing blue crystals stared at him with confusion and disbelief. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with emotion. The other sister stirred as well, her golden eyes flickering open. She looked at him, and for a moment, there was silence between them. Then she whispered, We owe you everything, the human shook his head. You don't owe me anything, just focus on surviving. But the sisters exchanged a strange look, something unspoken passing between them. They held his hands, weak but firm, as if swearing a silent vow. The human felt uneasy but also strangely connected to them. He had no idea what that promise meant. He only knew the storm was not over, not in the sky, and not in their lives. The fire crackled, the wind howled softer, but the human's eyes stayed on the cave's entrance, for he knew this was only the beginning. He had saved them once, but danger was still out there, waiting, circling, and watching from the shadows. The storm faded into silence, but the silence was not safe. The human sat at the cave's entrance, pistol in hand, watching the snow that glowed faintly under the moonlight. Behind him, the sisters slept side by side, their breathing stronger. Now their faces no longer pale like death. For the first time since he had found them, he allowed himself a single deep breath. But peace never lasted long in this frozen land. He could see it in the tracks outside, long claw marks pressed deep into the snow. The hunters had been real, not just a trick of his tired mind, and they would come back. They always came back. The human's jaw tightened. He could keep them alive for tonight. But this cave was not safe forever. They needed a real shelter, somewhere hidden, somewhere the hunters could not reach. When the sisters awoke, they looked at him with weak but curious eyes. The older one with golden eyes spoke first. You are not like the others. Her voice was soft, but carried weight. The younger one, her crystal blue eyes still heavy with exhaustion, whispered, "Why risk yourself for us?" The human hesitated, staring into the dying fire. He didn't know the answer himself. Maybe it was because leaving them to die had felt wrong. Maybe it was because he had seen too much death already. Finally, he said only, "Because I could not walk away." The sisters exchanged a look again, silent but meaningful. The human caught it but said nothing. Instead, he told them what mattered now. This cave won't hold. If we stay, the hunters will find us. We need a better place. The sisters sat up slowly, still weak but alive. There is a place, the golden-eyed sister whispered. An outpost hidden in the cliffs not far. Her voice trembled. But the path is dangerous and we are being hunted for a reason. The human's eyes narrowed. That explained the growls. In the storm, the shadows moving outside. He didn't know who these sisters were, but they were no ordinary travelers. Still, he only said, "Then we go, before they return." He helped them to their feet, wrapping them tightly in his coat. Their legs shook, but they leaned against him, trusting his strength. Step by step, they moved back into the snow. The storm had weakened, leaving only sharp winds and endless white. The world stretched empty, silent, yet filled with unseen eyes. Every crunch of his boots felt too loud. Every breath hung heavy in the air. The sisters guided him, pointing weakly toward the cliffs that rose like jagged teeth in the distance. It was a long walk, and the hunters were never far, more than once. He caught shapes moving across the snow, shadows slipping between the trees, glowing eyes watching from afar. But none dared attack, not yet. They were waiting for the right moment, waiting for weakness. Hours passed, the sisters fading in and out of strength. The human carried the younger one when she could no longer walk. Her arms hung around his neck, her faint voice whispering thanks that melted into sleep. The golden-eyed sister walked beside him, limping but refusing to fall. Her eyes never left the horizon, as if she feared something worse than the storm. Itself at last, the cliffs towered above them, sharp stone rising from the snow like the bones of the world, and hidden between them. The human saw it, an outpost half buried, its metal walls broken but standing. It looked abandoned, silent, but to him it was salvation. They reached the entrance, pushing through frozen doors that groaned as if waking from long sleep. Inside, the air was still, the floor covered in frost. Broken machines lined the walls and shattered glass crunched beneath their feet. Yet it was shelter stronger than the cave. He quickly searched the rooms, checking corners, shadows, every sound. It was empty. For now, he built another fire from scraps, the flames rising higher than in the cave. The sisters collapsed near the heat, their faces finally easing with comfort. The human stood guard, pistol in hand, listening. The wind outside screamed, but inside there was another silence. A silence that carried weight, as if the outpost remembered things best forgotten. The golden-eyed sister finally spoke, her voice low. "You should not have found us, human. You should not have saved us." The words struck him strange, almost like a warning. He turned to her, his eyes hard. "Then tell me why. Who is hunting you?" She looked at her younger sister, then back at him. Her voice shook. "Because we are not just anyone. We are daughters of the House of Vera, and they want us erased." The name meant nothing to him, yet the way she said it made the air colder. The sisters were not simple victims. They were exiles, royalty, or something far more dangerous. The human understood now. The hunters would never stop, not until the sisters were gone, and by saving them he had tied himself to their fate before. He could speak. A loud crash echoed through the outpost walls. The door shook violently, metal groaning under pressure. The sisters gasped, fear flashing in their glowing eyes. The human raised his pistol, his heart pounding. They had been found. The hunters had arrived. The metal door shook again, louder this time. The sound echoed. Through the ruined outpost, a heavy crash that rattled every wall. Dust fell from the ceiling. The fire flickered and the sisters pressed closer together, their glowing eyes wide with fear. The human gripped his pistol tighter, his breath steady but his heart racing like thunder. Outside, claws scraped against the steel, long and sharp. The hunters had found them, and they were not leaving without blood. The human moved forward, planting himself between the sisters and the door. "Stay behind me," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The sisters obeyed, clutching each other, their trembling hands barely holding steady. Another crash. The door bent inward. A roar followed, deep and guttural, the kind of sound that came from something born only to kill. The firelight shook with the vibrations, shadows dancing across the walls like dark spirits. The human's eyes narrowed, his finger resting on the trigger. He could not let fear control him, not now. Not when their lives depended on his strength. With a final crash, the door burst open, metal screeching as it tore away. The cold storm wind rushed in, carrying with it the stench of blood and ice. And then they entered, tall, armored figures with glowing red eyes, their bodies wrapped in black plates like living machines. They carried spears tipped with crackling energy, weapons designed for pain, not mercy. Their movements were slow, deliberate, like predators savoring the moment before the kill. The sisters gasped, whispering in unison, "The hunters of Vera." The human didn't know the name, but he didn't need to. He could see in their stance, in their eyes, that they were assassins, merciless and patient. They had come for the sisters, and nothing else mattered to them. The first hunter stepped inside, towering over the human. It raised its weapon, a low growl rumbling from its chest. The human fired, the plasma bolt searing through the dark. The shot struck the hunter's shoulder, burning through armor, forcing it back with a roar. The others surged forward, their eyes glowing brighter. Chaos filled the outpost. The human fired again and again, each blast lighting the darkness. The hunters closed in, their weapons slashing, sparks flying as steel met stone. He dodged, rolled, fired, his every movement fueled not by training alone, but by sheer determination. Behind him, the sisters huddled, their eyes glowing brighter, as if their fear awakened something deeper. One hunter lunged, spear crackling. The human barely ducked, the energy slicing the air where his head had been. He fired at close range, striking the creature in the chest, sending it crashing against the wall, but another replaced it instantly, and another after that. They were endless, shadows in the storm. A spear grazed his arm, burning his flesh with searing pain. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out, refusing to fall. Blood dripped down his sleeve, but still he fought. The sisters screamed his name, their voices breaking, their fear clear, but he only shouted back, "Stay down! Don't move! The fight raged on, each second heavier than the last. The human's pistol hummed hot, its charge running low. He knew he couldn't hold out forever, yet he also knew he had to. For if he fell, the sisters would be taken, and their lives would end in the snow. Suddenly, a strange sound filled the air, a pulse, deep and resonant. The hunters froze for a heartbeat, their glowing eyes flickering. The sisters stood, their bodies trembling, but their hands glowing faintly with strange energy. The younger one whispered, her voice like a song, "No more." The air shimmered. Light spilling from their palms, it was weak, unsteady, but enough to push the hunters back for a moment. The human's eyes widened. He didn't understand what power they held, but he knew it was dangerous. The hunters roared in fury, charging. Again, this time faster, angrier. The human grabbed the sisters, pulling them behind a fallen piece of metal as spears crashed into the ground where they had stood. The outpost shook with the force, dust filling the air, the fire dying to embers. He was breathing hard now, his pistol nearly empty. The sisters leaned against him, their glowing hands dimming, their strength drained. One whispered, "We can't hold it, not yet." The human gritted his teeth, staring at the advancing hunters. He had to buy them more time, had to keep them alive until they could escape. With a final deep breath, he stepped out from cover, the pistol raised, his body ready to fight until the last drop of blood. The hunters moved in, their weapons glowing brighter, their eyes fixed on him. The sisters cried out his name again, but he didn't falter. If this was the end, he would face it standing. But just as the hunters closed in, the ground shook beneath them. A hidden blast echoed from deep below the outpost, a rumble like thunder. The floor cracked, the walls trembled, and a hidden passage opened beneath the human's feet. He fell, the sisters tumbling with him, the world spinning into darkness. The last thing he heard was the roar of the hunters as the passage sealed shut, cutting them off from above. Darkness swallowed them as they tumbled through the hidden passage. The human landed hard on his side, his breath knocked out of him. The sisters cried out as they hit the ground, their voices echoing in the black tunnel. Above them, the roar of the hunters faded, muffled by stone. The secret door had closed, sealing them away from death, at least for now. The human groaned, pushing himself up. His arm burned where the spear had grazed him, but he ignored the pain. He reached for the sisters, pulling them close. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. The younger sister shook her head weakly, her blue eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The elder sister, golden eyes sharp even in fear, whispered, "This tunnel, it was built long ago by our house as an escape." The human nodded. "Then it's our only chance," he said, helping them to their feet. The tunnel stretched endlessly, lit only by faint crystals embedded in the walls. Cold air flowed through, it carrying the scent of stone and snow. It felt ancient, forgotten, but alive with secrets. They walked slowly, the sisters leaning against him. The younger one stumbled often, her body weak from the cold and from using her strange power. The human carried her when her legs gave out, his arms steady despite the weight. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath shallow but warm. The elder sister walked beside him, limping but refusing to be carried. Her golden eyes studied him in silence, as if trying to understand why he fought so hard for them. Hours passed in the dark, their steps echoing. Softly, the tunnel rose higher, leading them toward the mountains above. Finally, they reached an opening, the sharp light of morning snow pouring in. The human blinked against the brightness. They had escaped the hunters, but the world waiting outside was no kinder. The frozen mountains stretched out before them, endless white peaks cutting into the sky. Wind howled across the ridges, sharp and merciless. The human's breath fogged instantly, the cold biting deeper than ever. "This is the way," the elder sister whispered, pointing to the mountains. "If we cross them, there is safety. There, our allies." The human looked at the jagged path, his jaw tight. It would be a journey of pain and exhaustion, but he had no other choice. He adjusted his grip on the younger sister, held the elder close, and stepped forward into the snow. The climb was brutal. Snow crunched underfoot, deep and heavy. each step dragging them lower into exhaustion. The wind cut like knives, pushing them back, daring them to fall. The humans. Muscles burned, his wounds ached, but he carried on. He carried the younger sister in his arms while guiding the elder with his strength. Every time she stumbled, he pulled her up. Every time she faltered, he pushed her forward. The sisters tried to help. The elder whispered old songs of her people, soft words that seemed to push the cold away. The younger murmured thanks, her weak fingers clutching his shirt. At times, their voices gave him the strength to take another step. He felt their trust, their fragile hope resting on his shoulders. And in that moment, he knew he could not let them fall. But the mountains were cruel. Shadows moved along the ridges, distant but watching. The hunters had not given up. They were following, patient and silent. The humans saw their tracks in the snow, glowing marks of energy left behind by their weapons. The sisters saw them too, and their fear grew. "They will never stop," the elder whispered. "Not until we are gone." The human looked at her, his eyes steady. "Then we keep moving. We don't give them the chance." They pressed on through the endless white. Night fell, and the stars shone sharp above the peaks. The human built a small shelter of stone and snow, keeping the sisters close for warmth. They huddled together, his body heat once again their shield against the frost. The younger sister whispered, "You risk everything for us." "Why?" The human didn't answer right away. He looked at the fire's weak flame, then at their tired faces. Finally, he said, "Because you're alive, and that's worth saving." The sisters fell silent, their eyes soft, filled with something unspoken. The elder touched his wounded arm gently, her golden eyes glowing with a strange light. She whispered words in her own language, and the pain in his arm eased, not gone, but lighter, as if her touch carried healing. He stared at her, surprised, but she only said, "A gift for your strength." The night passed slowly, filled with wind and silence. When dawn came, they moved again, climbing higher into the ridges. But just as hope flickered in their hearts, the sound returned, a distant howl, low and sharp, echoing. Across the mountains, the hunters had found their trail, and they were closing in fast. The sisters clutched his arms, fear in their glowing eyes. The human's jaw hardened, his muscles tensed. He looked at the frozen peaks ahead, then back at the shadows moving below. The long escape was not over. It had only begun. And this time, there would be no tunnel to hide them. Only blood, snow, and the strength of his will. Snow stretched endless around them, white peaks rising like walls of ice. The human led the sisters higher, every step heavy with exhaustion. His arm ached from wounds, his breath cut short by the thin air, but he never slowed. Not while the sisters leaned on him, not while shadows moved far below. The hunters were still following, patient, silent, waiting for weakness. At night they hid under a hollow of stone, the fire small, their bodies huddled close for warmth. The younger sister, her blue eyes faint like fading stars, whispered, "You should not risk yourself for us." The human looked at her, his face tired but steady. "I will not abandon you." The elder sister watched him in silence, golden eyes glowing softly, her lips pressed into a thin line. At last she spoke, her voice heavy with meaning. "Do you even know what you have done, human?" He frowned, shaking his head. "I saved you, that's all." Her gaze hardened. "No, it is not all. You carried us through the storm. You gave us your warmth. You fought hunters with your blood." She leaned closer, her voice sharp. "In our people's law, that is not just saving, it is binding, it is destiny." The human's brow furrowed, confusion flashing across his face. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low. The younger sister reached for his hand, her cold fingers trembling as they wrapped around his. Her voice was soft, almost afraid. "Among our kind, when a man saves sisters from death, when he gives his body and strength for their lives, he becomes more than a protector." Her eyes lifted to his, glowing blue in the firelight. "He becomes their bond, their chosen, their promised one." The fire crackled, The storm outside howled, but inside silence pressed heavy on him. The human pulled back slightly, shaking his head. "No, that's not why I helped you. I don't want a reward. I don't want—" His words faltered because the sisters were not smiling. They were not joking. Their faces were serious, their voices steady, their eyes filled with belief. This was not a trick, not a game. It was their truth, their law, their destiny. The elder sister placed her hand on his wounded arm, her golden eyes unblinking. "You may not want it, but it has already been sealed," she whispered. "We belong to you now, and you belong to us." The word struck him like a blade. He stared at them, two fragile beings who had nearly died in the snow, now speaking of vows heavier than chains. He wanted to argue, wanted to deny it, but something in their eyes held him silent. The younger sister leaned closer, her voice trembling but full of devotion. "We will not leave you, not ever, not even if the stars themselves burn away." The human's chest tightened. He had carried them through storms, fought hunters for them, but marriage, destiny. These were weights he had never expected. He turned his eyes to the fire, his voice rough. "I am just a man. I don't rule galaxies. I don't fight wars for thrones. Why me?" The elder sister answered without hesitation. "Because you did what no one else would. You gave everything when you had nothing. You are human, and that makes you more than you know." Her words echoed in the small hollow, soft but powerful. The human closed his eyes, struggling with the truth pressing against him. He had only wanted to save lives, but now he was tied to something larger, something that could change the fate of worlds. Before he could respond, the sound returned. A distant howl, sharp and low, carried across the mountain wind. The hunters were near again. The sisters froze, fear flashing in their glowing eyes. The human stood, pistol in hand, his jaw set. "We move now." They climbed higher, the snow crunching beneath their boots. Every shadow made them tense. Every gust of wind carried the hunter's breath. The sisters followed him closely, their hands never leaving his, as if afraid he would vanish if they let go. Hours stretched into endless struggle, their bodies weak, their hope fragile. But the bond between them grew stronger with every step. At last they reached a ridge where the sky opened wide, the stars shone clear, and below them, the hunter's red eyes glowed faintly in the dark, climbing after them like demons. The sisters clung to him, their voices trembling. "They will not stop, not until they kill us all." The human's eyes hardened, his breath steady. "Then we don't stop either." But even as he spoke, the younger sister pulled at his arm, her voice urgent. "There is more you must know," she whispered, her blue eyes glowing brighter than ever. Her words came heavy, each one like thunder. "By saving us, by binding us, you are no longer only our protector, you are now part of our house, part of our blood." The human froze, his heart pounding. The elder sister finished the vow, her golden eyes fierce. "And that means human. The galaxy will come for you too." The ridge was silent, but the silence was a lie. Far below, red eyes glowed in the snow, dozens of hunters climbing higher, their shadows twisting against the moonlight. The sisters clung to the human, their breaths short, their glowing eyes filled with fear. The wind howled around them, carrying the promise of blood. The human stood tall, his pistol low on charge, his body aching with wounds. Yet his eyes were steady, unshaken. He had carried the sisters this far. He had fought storm and darkness. He would not let them fall now. But in his chest, questions weighed heavier than the snow itself. What did it mean to be bound to them? What would the galaxy demand of him? The elder sister turned to him, her golden eyes sharp as fire. "You must understand, human," she whispered. "We are not only sisters of blood, we are heirs." Her voice trembled. "Our father was ruler of the house of Vera, one of the great houses of the stars." The younger sister, her blue eyes glowing like ice, continued. "But betrayal came, and hunters were sent to erase us." Her hand tightened on his arm. "If we die, our house dies, and war will spread across the galaxy." The human's breath caught. He had not saved simple wanderers. He had saved the last heirs of a royal bloodline. And by their law, by their vow, he was now bound to them, tied to their fate. The sisters looked at him, their voices united. If you accept us, you do not only accept us as brides, you accept a throne, a war, and the eyes of all who live among the stars. The humans. Chest tightened. He had never wanted power, never wanted crowns or wars. He had wanted only to live, to survive, to help where he could. Yet now fate had placed a choice before him, one that would change more than his own life. He looked at the sisters, at their fragile but unbreakable bond, at the trust burning in their glowing eyes. They believed in him, not as a warrior of thrones, but as the man who had carried them through the snow. The hunter's howls grew louder, closer. The sisters gasped, clinging tighter. They are here. The human raised his pistol, though he knew it was nearly empty. He stepped forward, placing himself before them, his voice steady. Then they will have to go through me. The first hunter rose over the ridge, its red eyes burning like fire. It roared, spear glowing, rushing forward. The human fired, the blast striking true, the creature falling back into the snow. But more came, one after another, endless shadows climbing the ridge. The sisters cried out, their hands glowing faintly with power, but their strength was still weak. The human fought on, every shot a promise, every breath a vow. He would not let them be taken, not while his heart still beat. And then the ground shook, the sky split open with light, and a ship descended from the clouds, massive and silver, its engines roaring like thunder. The hunters froze, their eyes flickering. The sisters gasped, recognition flashing across their faces. It's them, the elder whispered, tears in her golden eyes. Our people, our loyal ones, they found us. The ship's weapons fired, beams of light striking the hunters, scattering them into the snow. The ridge trembled under the blasts, fire and ice filling the air. The human shielded the sisters as the ship landed, its ramp lowering, armored figures rushing out. They bowed low to the sisters, their voices strong. Princesses, you live. The sisters clutched the humans, arms, their eyes turning to him. They spoke as one, their voices filled with certainty. And we live because of him. The soldiers looked at the human with awe, with fear, with respect, for they saw not only a man but the one who had carried their rulers through death itself. The commander stepped forward, his voice shaking. By law and blood you are bound to them now, human. The house of Vera will rise again through you. The human's chest grew heavy, the weight of destiny pressing on his shoulders. He looked at the sisters, their eyes glowing with love and trust. He looked at the soldiers, their eyes filled with hope and fear, and he knew. This choice would change the galaxy. He could walk away, leave the throne, leave the vow. Or he could accept, take the sisters' hands, and bind himself not only to them, but to an entire people. The fire burned in his chest. The storm roared in his blood. He had never wanted crowns, but he had never turned from those in need. The sisters waited, holding out their hands, their voices soft. Choose us not for law, not for thrones, but because we chose you first. The human's breath slowed. He reached out, his hands closing around theirs, strong and steady. His voice carried across the ridge, across the storm. Then I choose you. The soldiers bowed, the sisters wept, the hunters fled into the snow, and the galaxy shifted. For on that frozen mountain, a man with no crown became a legend. The human who saved 2 alien sisters, the man who turned storm into hope, the protector who became their bond, their destiny, their chosen. And the galaxy would remember forever the night he made his choice.